and welcome to Mixology, where we launch each episode mixing up a beverage as we discuss how customer education and customer marketing intersect as scale engines to customer success. I'm Kristine Kukich, and along with Shannon Howard, we're bringing in Advocacy, what it is, and how to leverage it. Grab the ingredients below, and let's make that Indian summer rum punch called a Jungle Bird. Here's the list of ingredients: 1.5 ounces of rum, 3/4 ounce Campari, 1/2 ounce orgeat, 1.5 ounces pineapple juice, 1/2 ounce lime juice, 1 ounce mango juice, sparkling water, and fruit to garnish. You'll need a highball glass for this one as well as a shaker. Fill the shaker with ice and add all of the liquid except the sparkling water. From there, shake it up until you can feel the chill on the shaker. Pour over ice into a highball glass and top it off with sparkling water and your fruit garnish. Then just sit back, relax, and let's talk about advocacy. And this
Ooh, that looks good too. What is
this
this?
is a Jungle Bird, which I made it's a rum punch kind of thing. Oh,
Okay.
it was really good. Again, recipe for those of you who have not yet made the drink, go back a few seconds in the video and you'll see the recipe for this. I made it for a summer party a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to take a nice punch kind of thing to the
Hmm.
party, and this is what came up when I did my search, and I modified it just a little bit because it was, after all, an all afternoon event. So I added some sparkling water to kind of dilute it from its hardcore 100% alcoholic content. But it's got pineapple juice and mango and lime, so it's really, really yummy. And because, of course, this is the summer drinks, right? We're getting ready. I saw back to school stuff ads already.
Oh,
Right. And I wanted to kind of stretch this out as long as we possibly can with our summer selections. This time around, we're focused on advocacy. Last time, if you haven't seen it yet, go back and take a look. Mary Green helped us with a discussion on community, and she mentioned advocacy quite a bit in that video, which kind of leads into the content that we have for this one, right? Where we get to talk about advocacy and what that can mean to an organization. So let's start with that base question, Shannon.
hmm.
What is advocacy? How are we defining it as we get started,
Hmm.
or try to revamp whatever we might already have?
So Ari Hoffman once said to me that advocacy is anything that your customer does for your business that is not part of their job, right? So if you think about it in that context, that could be a lot of things. It can be serving on a product advisory council or a cab. It can be leaving you a review, doing a case study. It can be participating in community and giving back. It could be being on a webinar, right? Anything that we might ask our customers to do, serving as a reference, right, for other potential customers. Anything that we ask them to do is really an act of advocacy because they're taking time out of their day, their work, their busy schedule to do something for us instead. Would you
And I
agree,
think,
add to that?
yeah, I think that's it. I think it's the whole idea of having them do anything on your behalf that, and we could talk a little bit about this as we move through about the discussion on it, but not necessarily with any thought of reward,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Where they're doing it because they value
Mm-hmm.
our partnership, and that's why they are vocal in whatever way that means, right? Whatever any of
Mm-hmm.
those options. It involves some kind of written word, spoken word, recordings, whatever, to get out there and see it. So I think that's it. It's really the opportunity that any of our customers will take to do something on our behalf with no thought of reward.
Mm-hmm.
And then uh, that leads into kind of the next discussion. So what are the base components of building an advocacy program? Where do we start? Is it something we talk a lot about the intersection, right, of customer marketing and customer education. And when you're talking about focusing on advocacy, where does it sit? How do we even get started?
Mm. I mean, I think it's a cycle where, and you'll look at the, right, if you look at kind of a customer flywheel type thing or customer journey, advocacy is at the end, right? So they're a prospect and then they buy from you, they onboard, they retain and renew, and then they advocate. I don't think that it's always at the end there, right? Because you could have prospects who don't buy from you who are advocates, and you can have people early in their life cycle who are advocates. You can have people who are middle of their contract, they haven't renewed yet, who are advocates. So I don't think it's relegated to a part of the customer journey, but I think what's critically important is to invest in your customers, to build a relationship, to put value in. So if we think of relationships like a bank, in order to make any kind of, when you set up a bank account, what do you have to do? You have to start with like a minimum sum of money to start a bank account. So before you can make any withdrawals, you have to make some kind of significant deposit. And I think about that, like, how are we investing in our customers? So part of that is helping them realize value from the product, or our products solve the problem that they bought it for. And that's where education comes in. Is education is such a value driver for people, whether it's helping them realize value from the product or just investing in their own learning and development. Yeah, so I'll stop there. But what about for you? What would be the kind of the base components of building an advocacy program?
I think it starts. I think you're right. It's part of the continuous journey,
Mhm.
because if you start that investment early on in the pre-sales part of the process, if you if you invite the public to events, whether they are a customer or not,
Mhm.
that can be the start of building a relationship where you are becoming at TI, we talked a lot about it as thought leadership, right? Where in our industry, we wanted to be known as the thought leaders and the way things go. And I think that's part of it, because then what you become is the expert in that field, in that
Yeah.
industry, where whatever it is that you're doing. And that starts to build a relationship so that when it comes time to buy, you're probably one of the first people they think about,
Mhm.
right? When they
Or
start
when it comes
looking,
time
right?
to
When they start
renew,
having,
you've provided, and this is where I think we've talked about it before, and if not, welcome, we'll talk about it now, is the idea of a whole product solution, that you're not just selling your software or your product, you're selling the whole suite of things that come with it, including customer success, education and training. If you have, implementation and onboarding, professional services, everything that you do that adds value to the customer, you're selling that too. Like, they get access to all of that. And it's not just, because honestly, a lot of products, depending on what you're trying to buy, are pretty here and here. And then it becomes all those surrounding things that ultimately end up, is the
exactly.
customer service exceptional? Is there education and enablement that helps me to use this product successfully? Is there a community, like we were talking about with Mary, we can ask my questions and get them answered by someone who actually does the thing in the thing? Um, yeah. The other thing I would say on because I hear advocacy program, and I always think, I don't know that I've ever, that's not true. Once upon a time, ran a referral program. That was a formal thing. Um, I think you hear advocacy program and it is more formal, right? Like, you have some of these companies where you can sign up to be an advocate. You're added to an exclusive community. There are incentives and rewards that you get, whether it's status or awards programs or actual like swag, gifts, things like that. But I think a lot of advocacy starts with those one-on-one relationships, and it's just
I
being
think
able to
that's
have a customer. Yeah.
exactly the baseline component is setting a foundation of a relationship. And then from there, you can gamify the heck out of it, right? You can give points for answering questions in community, for you can give points like Kristine. Remember the conversation at
Mhm.
the SEDMA conference that Kristine talked about? She reached her 1 million, by the way,
Mhm.
right? She got her 1 millionth
Yeah.
user. And the idea that for some people, they just want to be a resource for people, for other people. And by giving them a way to do that, you are allowing them to say, look at what you too can learn, look at what you can be if you're doing all of these things. And they are then an exemplar
Mm-hmm.
of what advocacy can look like. And I think that when we talk about an advocacy program, we're not codifying
Mm-hmm.
all of that part, right? That foundational work that we really need to do to say that we can ask for references, right? That we can build a reference program, or
Often,
that we
yeah,
can set
you
up.
already have people engaged and then you're
Right.
just putting, some structure around it. I do want to plug. So Mary talked last episode and you're talking about it too. The educator is a type of advocate. So you have advocates, educators, status seekers. I think the other one's validators. So there's a podcast from Forrester on advocacy. I think it's Laura Ramos
Mhm.
did that podcast. So if you want to learn about the different types, but there's just the basic idea is that people will advocate in different ways and for different reasons, right? So you and
Right.
I are, I mean, every time you send me someone, I connect with them. Every time I send you someone, you connect with them because we want to talk to people, we want to help people. I think I shared on a podcast at one point, every job I've ever had has been because of community networking. I didn't actually really like talk to somebody. I was engaged in an online community about whatever it was. And then people saw, hey, I see that you're really active in here and that you're familiar with whatever. Would you like want to come do
Yeah.
that with us, And so I think I fall more in that educator. I want to share, in my dream world, I take all my playbooks and like publish them. I strip decks a lot and like post them in communities because I just feel like why reinvent the wheel? Just take what I've
Right.
done,
Well,
modify it
exactly.
for yourself.
And when we're in customer ed and customer marketing, the teams are small.
Yeah.
Even big teams, even big organizations. Lila Meyer's team is 15 people for a global organization as large as Gainsight.
Mm-hmm.
The only person I saw who had a, a right size, I think, was probably when Tom Stutter was at Zoom Info, and he had 50 people reporting to him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was across the entire spectrum of community and customer marketing and customer education, uh, and he wrote all the tech specs and tech docs as well for the knowledge base. And so all of that, and, and what we do when we build advocates is we get the word out without having to utilize headcount,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
because
amplify
our
our reach.
exactly, it's amplification through all of those interactions that we build, through
Mm-hmm.
the programs that we establish, whether it's the things where we just bring people together,
Mm-hmm.
the some of the virtual conferences, right? When you get an opportunity to, because it'll never be the same as it was pre-COVID, right? Where everybody was
Yeah,
spending money to go somewhere. I do admit that I will pick two conferences a year, a
sure.
spring one and a fall one, and I'll go to those and in person, because I do to a certain extent crave. But I'm going to see Ari next week. Ari
Yeah,
Hoffman, he's speaking at a deal next week
local
here
event.
in Portland. So so we get, I get the chance to see people, but also it's part of that whole, I'm building, I don't want to say family because that's wrong. It's
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's
But
in my,
community,
right, it's just community. And I talk about it in my life like I use family, right? It's friends and family that have melded together to become people with whom I choose to associate,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's what we do when we're building this community of advocates, because if you're building your community well, advocates is a natural output.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what I was thinking too, is if you're and this is where I think education and advocacy come along together really nicely. One, because education feeds people to then become advocates, but especially if you have a community, a social element of your education program, it's going to surface advocates because you're going to hear from people who come to your workshops and live trainings, who participate in community discussions, who might be a great fit to come to speak on a webinar or speak at a conference, or they might
Yeah.
be willing to talk with somebody else who's doing something similar. So I think it can be
And
a great way.
Shannon's answering the third question already, right? The third question is how can CE help, right?
Yeah.
So
It just all, I think community, advocacy, and education all tie really nicely together. Not surprisingly, this is Melissa Van Pelt when he had her on. That's her remit, right? Because all of these things feed each other and they build off of each other. I just see, I don't know, I see very clearly where all those things work together. Education feeds people to become advocates, services and identified as advocates. You know, those advocates in turn like bring new people into your ecosystem. And I think it's such a huge opportunity for companies. So I mentioned, you know, the formal advocacy program I ran, it was for an online school. And roughly 40% of their monthly sales, new students coming in, came from past students. And so it was
right.
how we engage and activate these advocates, because as marketers, we're reaching out to people through the internet, but these people that we sell to, they already network with other people like them, right? We all naturally kind of gravitate toward people who are similar to us in some way, whether
Who
that's
are doing what we do, yeah, who do what we do in whatever that is, right? The people who
yeah,
crochet or, you know, dog training or right.
exactly. But
That was
it
the
is,
example
that
that
is,
Barry was in the last
yeah.
video.
But it is, yeah, you build community around those things and you get to know, right? Like people who have dogs know other people who have dogs. And people who love plants know other people who love plants. And people in customer marketing know other people who do customer marketing. And so
Exactly.
you're tapping into these networks of people that you didn't previously have access to because of advocates. I just see where it's such a great, not just post sale. I really, this is my firm belief, there is no new customer that comes in that did not touch a previous customer, you know, in some
Some way,
way.
exactly, in some way.
Yeah, whether it is a reference or a review, or they heard about you in a Slack community, or they read a case study in
They
some
saw,
way,
yeah,
you
they
know?
read a case study. They saw your post on LinkedIn because it was you were the
Mhm.
friend of a friend, and the next thing you know, you're reading Laura's post, and it's talking about yada yada, right?
I
And
see that sometimes where someone will post on LinkedIn that I'm not connected with, no one at Intellum is connected with. And then one of our customers will comment and be like, you should talk to Intellum, or you should look into Evolve. And
mhm.
they'll comment people that we didn't previously have a relationship with. And now we get to know like who this person is, and they're exposed to what we have to offer in a way that they wouldn't have been before. You know, so that's where those advocates come to play, even on the marketing and sales side, is
and
opening doors to new relationships.
and it's completely building those relationships. We could not do the advocacy part of it without the relationships. I don't see how it's possible. If you don't have those, there's no way to even to ask for some of the hard things, right? Case studies, bane of my existence. Well, I hate is a strong word, but I think it's strong enough for this particular
Sure.
example. I really don't like trying to put together case studies. I find ways to get around them all the time
Hmm.
because it's a time commitment,
Hmm.
and it's never, because it's not something that someone has to do. It's something that they're graciously allowing to happen that we've
Hmm.
asked them to do, right? And I think that's for me, that's always been a challenge because I would much rather get on a call and just talk to you about what you're doing and how you're doing it and what's going on with that, and then turn that into something rather than come into it with this prescriptive
Hmm.
idea, right? Because
Now,
I don't think that advocacy is we did, right? Everyone I've ever done has had here's your list of 10 questions. And
hmm.
I don't think that's right. I think that the way that we work is much more organic than that. And the way that we talk about the tools that we use when we work is also more organic than that. It's not prescriptive. I can't identify the top 3 reasons that I use this tool over that tool. I don't,
Hmm.
without really being much more negative than I want to be, because it's more about why I don't use the other tool than why I do use the other one, right?
Yeah. Right. But that's what we
right?
were
It's something I
saying.
really don't like.
So many things are apples to apples, and that's where these other things come in, is how am I treated as a customer? Do I feel valued? Is support helpful? Is there an active community? Am I being invested in? Am I getting help from this company, whatever that help looks like, whether it is professional services or documentation or customer education or a relationship with an account manager or CSM. It's those things that really make a difference, and it comes down to that relationship with people. Yeah.
And how we build that foundation on which the relationship can sit.
Hmm.
Because organizationally, if we don't do some of the work up front to
Hmm.
make sure that when we're reaching out to build those relationships, we have to have tools.
Yeah.
And some of the tools are people, some of the tools are software, some of the tools are our tool, our product, and some
Hmm.
of them are just the way that we do business. And so all of that, I think, contributes to creating advocacy.
And that's where I think that's why advocacy sits in customer marketing, right? Is because we're thinking about scale. And so when you think about the number of accounts the average customer success manager has in their book of business, are they talking to these people on a regular basis? Probably not, right? Maybe at best you get a QBR, and then maybe they're engaging with support. So it's how do we engage these people at scale? How do we invest in them at scale so that we don't end up, right? Because some people do just naturally get more support than other people, whether it's because they're asking a lot of questions or whatever that is. But how are we making sure? I call it air cover. I'm providing air cover. So no matter what happens, I know that you're getting these communications, you're getting this value from us, you're getting this content. You're like, everybody should have these regular touch
Baseline,
points
right?
with us.
Exactly. There's a baseline of communication from us as an organization to our entire customer base that
Mhm.
is standardized and consistent, that we have ways to reach out to people that are standardized and consistent,
Mhm.
and that we
Standardized
are
is the best
leveraging,
word. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
because we run into the problems that we run into is when we have people who are not following standard and consistent methodologies, and that's when we run into problems, right?
And it's
Where somebody
never
heard
really
something
like
one way.
one person. It's usually there's so much change happening in our organizations. I almost think of life cycle marketing as a fail safe. Your account
Right,
manager guaranteed is going to change, whether that's because the organization changes or the book of business changes, or someone was promoted, moved to a different team. Like, there's just always going to be change. And how do we make sure that there is that standardized, consistent communication,
right.
standard investment into customers on a regular basis that doesn't depend on one person, right? Because anytime something depends on one person, strong chance of failure, not because of that person, but just because life
Life
happens.
happens. Life happens,
Yeah.
and you can't always predict.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yes to advocacy overall. And we asked 3 questions about advocacy this time around because we could talk again. We could go on for hours and hours and hours about it. What is advocacy? And basically, comes down to just building those relationships, right?
Yeah. Anything your customer does for you out of relationship with you for your business, it doesn't always provide them with value. Maybe sometimes, maybe they like to talk with other people in the industry, but sometimes they're just doing it as a favor.
And I think that's the undercurrent, right? Relationships is the undercurrent answer to all 3 of the
Oh,
questions
yeah.
that we asked today. What are the base components of building an advocacy program if you're going to go that route? And again, it's building relationships. You can't do it without relationships. And then the third one is how can CE help? And that's why, right? Because it helps you build those relationships.
Mhm.
And Pam said something today. It shouldn't just be CE, it should be said, right? We're going to go CED, customer
Okay.
education.
I mean, Sedma does it. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. And stick to said as the one of the ways that we help build that foundational relationship with our customers is through education, whether it's product training or the why trainings that we build that are in association with the product trainings, and the work that we do through customer marketing to really create the scale portions of those communications and those interactions that help us really build those relationships, not only between us and the customer, but between the customers themselves.
Mhm.
Right.
That's good. Yeah. It's not just, again, that one way, just customers and us. It's customers, us, them, the whole.
Right. It's all, remember Tinker? Do you have Tinker Toys? Does anybody remember Tinker Toys?
Mm.
They're the little circles that have holes on the edges, and then there's these wooden
Oh,
dowels
yeah.
that, yeah, that you can make like a wheel spoke, and things just touch. And then
Mhm.
before you know it, you've got things that are actually connected that aren't connected directly. And you go through the chain and you look, oh wow, it's right there. It's Shannon, right? In the middle of all of that. It's because somebody knew Shannon, who knew Shannon, who knew Shannon. Or that, and that's what we're talking about, right? Is being able to create those relationships across the board. And we couldn't do any of the advocacy without the concept of building relationships with our customers and with our people. I mean, we talked cross silo, cross functional communication already, and that's something that falls into this because it helps us build the foundation of consistency for those other relationships that we build with our advocates to be.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
and early identification and activation of those advocates, because sometimes your support team knows, and sometimes your customer success team knows, and sometimes your sales team knows, and sometimes your education team knows. They all have people in mind, so you can tap them in the early days to figure out who are those advocates. Let's start.
and who are the
start.
voices? Yeah, who are the voices that we can leverage?
Mhm.
So that's the plan. Build your relationships, and then from relationships comes advocacy.
Mhm.
So with that,
All right.
see you next time.